Hey there, I'm Doug Boynton, and you're tuned to WHRO's Weekly Edition, your go-to for the news and stories shaking things up around here. Here's what we've got for you this week. In the latest twist of the Williamsburg-James City County school drama, Williamsburg says, you know what? We're going to stay. Ever wonder how voting rights advocates actually do their thing? Well, we'll take you behind the curtain with a fella in Richmond who's making that happen.
What I do doesn't normally turn into a paycheck. What I do has an impact on a lot of people.
And the Navy, turns out they're running short on people and parts to keep the ships running. What does that mean? We'll break it down. So remember when Williamsburg was all like, we might ditch James City County and go by ourselves in the school district game? Well, a year later, it's kind of like an old boyfriend or girlfriend. It says, we're good, we'll stay. WHRO's Ryan Murphy breaks it down.
Williamsburg wants to work things out with the county and keep the joint school district together, the city says in a statement released Friday. But it says the studies done while the city was exploring the breakaway have revealed problems with the way the joint district operates. In May, Williamsburg City Council pushed the district to close the performance gap between students from the city and those from the county. Williamsburg students are less likely to graduate than their county counterparts and lag behind in every testing category, often by double-digit percentages. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
We should mention, of course, that Williamsburg-James City County Schools are stakeholders in HRETA, which holds the license to the WHRO stations. So goes inflation, so goes cost of living raises. Veterans will get a 2.5% bump in benefits starting in December. It's tied to Social Security increases now. The kicker, of course, it's less than what they've been getting in recent years. WHRO's military reporter Steve Walsh has the scoop.
Social Security officials announced the increase Thursday. It's the smallest cost of living adjustment since the pandemic began, a sign that inflation is slowing, says Marquise Barfield with the DAV.
It's good to keep pace, but, it wouldn't hurt to just be a little bit in front of inflation, especially when you had years where we were stagnant and we didn't get any increases at all.
Most recently, in 2016, veterans received no annual increase. This year, lawmakers passed legislation officially tying the cost of living increases that veterans receive directly to the increases planned for those on Social Security. The amount is roughly an extra $48 a month for the average veteran. Roughly 215,000 veterans receive VA benefits in Virginia. Steve Walsh, WHRO News.
Virginia's Attorney General Jason Miyares is teaming up with others to push back on some new rules about staffing in nursing homes. WHRO's Nick McNamara has the details.
Jason Miyares and a coalition of other attorneys general filed a lawsuit Thursday over rule changes in nursing homes. The rule would expand staffing requirements. Currently, nursing homes require 8 or more hours of continual care per day from registered nurses. This would expand to 24 hours per day, starting in May 2026 for urban facilities and May 2027 for rural facilities. Miyares and others argue that the new rule would be too costly and demand burdensome reporting requirements that are too difficult to implement. The federal rule would offer a hardship exemption for nursing facilities that are unable to meet the new requirements. Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
One cannabis company is gearing up for expansion in Shenandoah. Not everyone is thrilled about that. Some want to challenge the license. What does all this mean for medical marijuana patients? WMRA's Randy B. Hagee has the story.
When the Virginia Cannabis Control Authority chose a medical marijuana provider for a large portion of the state last month, they unleashed the winning company to build cultivation, distilling, and retail facilities, and those that were not chosen to mount a legal challenge to the selection process. After 41 applicants were whittled down to 33 finalists, the authority chose the provider for Health Service Area 1 by random lottery. Air Wellness is the parent company that won. They operate nearly 100 dispensaries across 8 states.
I have been involved with the Virginia medical market since its conception. With other operators, I'm very familiar of what the patients are looking for.
George DiNardo, Air's chief operating officer, came to the company after several years with Columbia Care, according to LinkedIn. That's now known as the Cannabis Company, which operates dispensaries around Richmond. Air Virginia's application listed an undeveloped property in Clearbrook, Frederick County, as the possible site for their headquarters. So the Clearbrook site is not set in stone. DiNardo said they're looking at properties zoned for light industrial use.
There's a lot of things that go into these decisions to make sure that we are able to get zoned correctly and then build out as quickly as possible. So making sure that we have enough power, we don't have to upgrade transformers, things like that.
In the meantime, some of the companies that were not chosen plan to challenge the authority on how they made their decision by lottery.
The situation was botched. The wrong company won, and we need to kind of cushion that blow of having all out-of-state companies and let some Virginia companies into the mix to balance out this medical monopoly, as a lot of people call it.
Tanner Johnson is the CEO of Pure Shenandoah, which produces CBD products in Rockingham County. An attorney for both his company and Blue Ridge Medical announced their intentions at the authority's last board meeting. They were two of the only applicants based in Virginia. Johnson said they don't know yet which court they'll do this through. An odd quirk of this process is that it allowed one company to apply 21 times by creating separate LLCs with different names. All 21 subsidiaries of TheraTrue made it to the final round, meaning they accounted for almost 2/3 of the finalists and still didn't win. Regardless of which company ends up building dispensaries from Winchester to Charlottesville, marijuana advocates say it's long overdue. This region has gone without medical marijuana because the original pharmaceutical processor lost their license and then tied up that decision in court for 3 years.
For Virginia patients, this process has taken far too long, and these multiple lawsuits, while they may have business interests behind them, are really harming patients. They need access, they need convenient access.
J.M. Pedini is the executive director of Virginia NORML, which stands for the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws.
Virginia's medical cannabis program is really operating under an outdated model. This was adopted by the Virginia General Assembly some years ago, and it involves limited licensure, a limited number of patient access points, and that is a real flaw in the state's program.
Ultimately, an expansion of the entire medical market is what Pure Shenandoah is hoping for, too. That would require new legislation,
which would just add a few more licenses in each HSA. Recreational so far behind that we just need to keep making some progress there because patients and consumers in Virginia just need it.
While Governor Glenn Youngkin nixed a recreational retail market earlier this year, he has signed some legislation favoring marijuana patients, protecting public employees from being fired for using medical cannabis. I'm Randy B. Hagee.
Don't touch that dial. Still ahead on Weekly Edition, a Virginia Beach doctor is making gender-affirming care more accessible, and Hampton Roads Transit is rolling out a second try of its Uber-style service. But first, on the Outer Banks, Dare County is stepping up to grab some federal money to buy out beachfront homeowners whose places keep getting wrecked by storms or, might just fall into the ocean. WHRO's Michelle Hankerson has more on that.
The county is applying to use money from FEMA's flood mitigation grant on 20 homes in Rodanthe. Barton Grover works on waterway grants. He estimates it will take 3 to 5 years until the county will actually be able to buy the Rodanthe homes.
We just had our kickoff meeting for Hurricane Dorian home elevation, where we're elevating 31 houses. We just had that about 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, and Dorian happened in 2019. So FMA is not too dissimilar in timings.
2 homes in Rodanthe fell into the ocean last month, and 4 total have collapsed this year. The National Park Service has used grant funding in the past to buy and demolish 2 homes in Rodanthe. It's an expensive undertaking that requires owner cooperation. Michelle Hankerson, WHRO News.
A doctor who moved to Virginia Beach this year is making waves working to improve access to gender-affirming care in Hampton Roads. And get this, his very first local patient says he saved her life. WHRO's Nick McNamara reported the story.
For Christine Bryan Burnell, gender-affirming care helped her find peace and a hard-to-describe sense of freedom.
I feel like I'm no longer bound to anything that doesn't represent who I am.
For a lot of transgender and gender nonconforming people nationwide, similar medical services can be hard to access. It's what makes the arrival of Dr. Nima Baradaran to Virginia Beach so important for Brian Burnell. Baradaran is a urologist with Urology of Virginia. It's the only medical provider in the area that provides bottom surgeries, a type of gender-affirming surgery that transforms one's genitals to reflect their gender identity. Gender-affirming surgeries are just one approach to addressing gender dysphoria. Such surgeries are associated with significant reductions in suicidal ideation for those that seek them out. Baradaran moved to the Commonwealth in early 2024 by way of Ohio, where he was part of Ohio State's gender-affirming surgery program.
We developed a program and it became multidisciplinary and very successful with high volume and high quality. We are hoping to reproduce that process here in the Hampton Roads.
Baradaran hopes he can broaden access to gender-affirming care locally as he plants his roots in the region. Brian Burnell says the trans community needs more people like him to bridge the gap. Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
Virginia's 2nd congressional district is shaping up to be one of those races that all national eyes are watching. Republican incumbent Jen Kiggins and Democrat Missy Cotter-Smazel had their one and only debate last week, and, well, let's just say things got real. WHRO's Connor Worley has the scoop.
The debate came down to contrasts. Both candidates agreed to disagree on a variety of issues that they say are impacting Virginians. Kiggins, who has held the seat since 2022, focused on issues surrounding inflation, economic security, and immigration.
Prices are still too high, groceries are too expensive, and interest rates are too high to buy a house or car. We have a wide open border, illegal immigration hit all-time highs, and our tax dollars are being spent to house and feed illegal immigrants.
Cotter-Smazel attacked Kiggins' record on abortion and immigration. She also zeroed in on what she says is Kiggins' inability to fix problems during her tenure.
Jen Kiggins talks about costs, but has done nothing to improve them. They've only risen on her watch. But she has taken the opportunity 13 times to attack your reproductive freedom. She has voted to criminally punish doctors. She has used our military budgets to attack the bodily autonomy of women serving in our military.
The Hampton Roads Chamber sponsored the debate. It was broadcast live by our media partners at WTKR. You can view the entire debate at their website. Connor Worley, WHRO News.
The Virginia Center for Investigative Journalism at WHRO is spotlighting the unsung heroes who keep democracy from completely going off the rails, whether it's through their job, activism, or just volunteering to do stuff. This week, WHRO's Cianna Morales takes us to Richmond to meet Richard Walker, a guy who's all about restoring voting rights.
And we're doing a series of what I'd like to call fish fries, get out the vote, to get those folk aware of the purpose and the importance of voting and registering to vote, of getting their rights restored. Fish brings out the best in people. It at least brings them out. So my organization, Bridging the Gap in Virginia, as well as others, have traveled throughout the state of Virginia, checking the statuses of individuals to see if they were a part of that group that were released or were given their rights back by the previous administrations. So there's still a whole lot of individuals out there that have no clue that their rights have been restored. I grew up in East Orange, New Jersey. My mother, my grandmother pretty much raised us, and it was mandatory for us to go with them when we were young to the polling place, and it was ingrained in us that when you turn 18, you will be going to the voting polls. I was ultimately incarcerated and spent 2 years in prison in this Commonwealth of Virginia. I was released in 2005. And that's when I discovered and found out in the Commonwealth of Virginia, if you're a convicted felon, you lose your right to vote, you lose your right to be on a jury, you lose your right to be a public notary, and you lose your right to run for public office. So that was unheard of. I knew nothing about that. I became angry behind it, and And then that's when I started advocating against it.
A federal judge has rejected a lawsuit challenging how Governor Glenn Youngkin restores voting rights for convicted felons released from prison.
The judge saying the process might not be transparent or even fair, but it is legal.
We know that the numbers are not increasing for those individuals that are being restored by this governor. That much we do know. When I came out of prison and realized that, there's a whole lot of folk that are probably far worse off than me, whether it be individuals being incarcerated forever or being not allowed to vote forever, being disenfranchised when they come out of incarceration, that they have to apply to a man, to an individual, to get their constitutional rights restored back to them. Yeah, it became bigger than me. Yeah. Selfless service without looking for accolades and awards. Yeah, that's how I look at it, What I do doesn't normally turn into a paycheck. What I do has an impact on a lot of people. Civil service, any type of service to your community helps the longevity of the community to exist, helps the flourishing, thriving of a community. Having the ability to vote, having the ability to travel, having the ability to run for office, having the ability to live and thrive in a community or country without any repercussions or without any disenfranchisements, without being segregated, without being denied opportunities, without being eliminated from society. A fair chance of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Simply put, yeah, that's democracy.
This is WHRO's Weekly Edition. Remember, for any stories you've missed, you can visit us on the WHRO smartphone app or all social media platforms.
Good news for all you leaf peepers out there. Most of the winding Blue Ridge Parkway is back in business after Hurricane Helene decided to crash the party and shut it down for a bit. WHRO's Barry Graham has the lowdown.
The parkway reopened on Friday from milepost 0 to milepost 198 in Virginia, the National Park Service said in a news release. The entire 469 miles of the parkway had been closed because of damage from the hurricane. Especially hard hit was from milepost 280 near the Great Smoky Mountains to the Virginia state line with washed out roads and downed trees. The Blue Ridge Parkway is one of the nation's most visited parks. Close to 17 million visitors toured there in 2023, with a resulting $1.4 billion in economic activity to North Carolina and Virginia. Barry Graham, WHRO News.
Hampton Roads Transit is at it again, rolling out round 2 of its Uber-style micro-transit service in Newport News and Virginia Beach. WHRO's Ryan Murphy reported the story.
HRT's on-demand service allows riders to request a ride on an app or by phone and get picked up by a wheelchair-accessible van within 15 minutes for the same cost as a ride on a bus. The second pilot covers central Newport News and the Bayside area of Virginia Beach, which both have limited bus service. HRT got more than 13,000 ride requests during the first test run of the program in 2023. This on-demand pilot will run through next September. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
According to the Government Accountability Office, the U.S. Navy is running low on both people and parts. That makes it tough to keep the ships afloat. WHRO's Steve Walsh reported for the American Homefront Project.
As their families gathered on shore to say goodbye, the last of the 6,200 sailors boarded the USS Harry S. Truman in Norfolk. The carrier was preparing to deploy for its current mission, bolstering U.S. forces in the Middle East. Gunner's mate Roy Allen Gordon described what his average day is like as a weapons technician.
That's like all the work we do is maintenance, so probably like 80% of our job is maintenance. For us, maintenance can be servicing like the firearms, like cleaning them. I know for our 50 cals, like when it rains and stuff, we gotta clean them.
According to a new report from the Government Accountability Office, one of the strike group's biggest challenges could be a shortage of spare parts and sailors trained to maintain the ship. The GAOs surveyed ships throughout the fleet, including Norfolk, and found on average the ships left port with only 65% of the parts needed to perform routine maintenance. Ships were also undermanned and the crews were not properly trained. The Navy has had a backlog of maintenance jobs for more than a decade, says Brian Clark with the Hudson Institute.
The Navy hasn't had the time to plan out the job, or they're rushing the shipyard to get through the maintenance period because the ship needs to get back to sea, or the ship was delayed getting into the shipyard because it was extended on a previous deployment.
Carriers like the USS Truman are on a set cycle of deploying roughly every 3 years, but smaller ships like destroyers often deploy more frequently. They enter the shipyards less frequently. Deferred maintenance puts more of a strain on the crews to keep up with repairs, Clark says.
They don't have that same kind of constraint on their schedule, and they can just deploy again and again and again. And if that means canceling a maintenance period, the Navy will do that. And you're starting to see the results of that.
Most officers said it was difficult to perform maintenance at sea. In some cases, sailors were moved to fill other roles on the ship or were unavailable. Dan Grazer, a senior fellow at the Stimson Center, says the Navy's struggle to recruit sailors also strains maintenance.
They need people first. That should be everyone's highest priority. And when you try to take people out of the equation, then you just create this cascade of problems.
The Navy needs about 84,000 sailors to operate all of its ships and subs. The report found the Navy was short about 16% in 2023. There are more than 334,000 people on active duty. Grazer says it's time for the Navy to start looking at the number of sailors assigned to shore duty.
Clearly, the Navy needs a shore establishment to operate the fleet, but I'm willing to bet that there are a number of sailors out there that could possibly be put back on sea duty to help solve maintenance crises that the Navy has, because this is a problem.
In the last year, repair issues have impacted the USS Boxer, the USS Wasp, and the USS Iwo Jima. USS Boxer was sidelined repeatedly for issues involving defective parts and improper maintenance.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning as the Harry S. Truman Carrier Strike Group departs on a regularly scheduled deployment.
As the carrier was leaving for the Eastern Mediterranean, Rear Admiral Sean Bailey, commander of the Truman Carrier Strike Group, said it was fully manned.
I'm confident we've got all the support, all the supply, all the materials necessary to sustain us for as long as need be. Clearly, we put a lot of time and effort into getting the ship and the strike group ready, and we're ready for our deployment.
Even so, before the carrier left Norfolk in September, it was already a year behind in going to the shipyard for its 25-year midlife overhaul, which includes refueling its nuclear reactors. Now that maintenance won't happen until it returns from the Middle East. In Norfolk, I'm Steve Walsh.
You've been hanging out with WHRO's Weekly Edition. Big thanks to the crew this week: Ryan Murphy, Cianna Morales, Barry Graham, Nick McNamara, Steve Walsh, and Michelle Hankerson. Shout out to WMRA's Randy B. Hagee and, of course, Connor Worley, the mastermind behind today's program. Just a friendly reminder, you can always binge the full episodes on the Weekly Edition podcast feed. Need a news fix anytime? Hit up WHRO.org, grab the WHRO smartphone app, or dive into the WHRO Reports podcast feed. For all of us at WHRO and WHRV, I'm Doug Boynton. Catch you next time.